Hello and welcome to a rebroadcasting of our BFA show that took place on Thursday. I'm here with James again, and we're excited to be doing some tests of trying to kind of make this a little bit less glitchy than last time. So I'm Anza, the SNU Gallery Director, and I'm here to get James welcomed and tell you all how awesome it is to be doing a BFA and how much hard work has gone into it. So James has taken some extra classes, has done this entirely body of work that's traditionally installed in a gallery, but instead is going to be shared with you here. And so rather than taking up too much of your time, I'm going to pass it on over to James.
Good evening and welcome to the rebroadcast of my BFA show, Metaphysically, Wrinkle-Free. I'd like to welcome everybody here and thank you for tuning in. When we start our BFA, it is a daunting task to say the least. And we start to break it down by painting, by sketch. And I'm proud to say that everything that I've created tonight looks absolutely nothing like what I planned it to be. And so without further ado, I'm going to share this with you guys. And this is my show, Metaphysically Wrinkle-Free. Give me 1 second.
I'm going to jump in for 1 second very quickly and say, if anyone's out there listening, feel free to put questions into the comment boxes and we'll ask them of James.
Thanks. And I'd like to begin tonight by first kind of telling you about myself. And give me 1 second because my program seems possessed. And we will go back to the beginning. And this is why we do rebroadcast, so that we can work out the technical difficulties, including user error. All right, so again, welcome to my show, which is Metaphysically Wrinkle-Free. The funny part about the title is I heard it in a movie and love the arbitrary nature of the comment. To start off, I'd like to read you my artist statement. And what it is my focus as an artist is on creating and distorting the perception in both the physical and conceptual world that exists around us. And I work within the mindset that only our imagination restricts our perception. I begin usually with fluid undulating shapes and lines and compose them into certain multimedia illustrations and paintings of complex mechanical creations. And in these compositions, I am addressing escapism and the many actions we as complex organisms with sentient thought use to achieve such a state of mind. In other words, what are the things that we do to escape the harsh realities that we sometimes face? I draw very heavily on the influence of comic books, cartoons, both in the Sunday funnies back when we still used to have physical newspapers, all the way to Alan Moore and a lot of other stuff. You also see me draw on digital media and graffiti in my work, and I try to combine these styles to create a rhythm of my own. Now that I've gotten kind of an idea of the show, let me give you a little bit of overview about myself. I was born at Oak Harbor Naval Base in Washington, raised in San Diego until I was 15. And then I moved to Colorado to finish high school. I'm an illustrator. I dabble in almost any medium I can get my hands on. And after serving as a medic in the Army, which I drew on every single textbook that I ever had, I decided to take drawing as something that I wanted to educate myself further on. This is actually the culmination of that goal. is me beginning on that road to bring art into my life in an educated fashion and use that education to better understand not only what I'm drawing, but what exists around me. I'm also the lab technician up at Sierra Nevada College. And while my influences draw directly from a lot of illustrators, the environment that at Sierra Nevada College that encourages us to collaborate and work with other students, and as Rick calls it, the petri dish of inspiration. I couldn't have created this body of work outside of any other place. It's strictly to Sierra Nevada College, and Sierra Nevada University. It's the environment is that everything that I do is influenced by the people around me and the way I was taught to address certain things. Some of the artists that influenced me greatly, first is Leonardo da Vinci and his anatomy sketchbooks and his anatomy catalogs. When I was a medic in the Army, I looked at these extensively. His understanding of tubes being the essential apparatus in the body that brings life to and takes death away from it is something that's a great inspiration and one of the things that really influences my work as a surrealist. Another person that I greatly admire, and anybody who's ever seen one of my shows knows that I love this guy. His name is Tiago Hoysel, and he is a Brazilian digital illustrator and animator, and he does caricature art. And I love his sense of humor, his sense of shading, his sense of depth. He's really an inspiration in a lot of stuff I do. Growing up, I read a lot of Calvin and Hobbes. And what always impressed me was the artistry that went into the comics. It's one of the few where shading made the picture. And not to mention, since I'm doing a show on escapism and the mechanics that we use, having a cartoonist who had a young person with an imaginary friend, which is one of the ultimate and most adorable escapism mechanisms we use, is not a bad influence. I also grew up doing graffiti, and I've always done socially motivated graffiti, everything from social justice on its way down. And so Banksy is a huge influence, not just the style of art that he does, but the conceptual way in which he approaches it and the methodology in keeping anonymity part of the situation that influences his work. It's just outstanding, the message he's able to achieve with simple stencils and paint. Another person that I grew up watching that influenced me greatly to be a surrealist was Twist, aka Barry McGee. Some of the black and white compositions and the shading is something that really you'll see in my work as we move on. So the first painting I wanted to talk to you about is called Morphine Disconnected. And it is a colored pencil and pastel on matte board. It is an exercise in depth, and it's something that I find new stuff in even when I look at it constantly. One of the big themes behind this is when I had a surgery to correct some damage in my face. They hit a nerve in my face. I am now plagued with constant migraines, and they tried to approach this by putting me on opiates. And this is part of the feeling that I got when they started putting me on these drugs. One of the reasons that the tubes, pipes, and mechanics are so dense in this is because of the convoluted aspect of having opioids in your life and the absolute strength that it takes to get away from them, which is something not everybody achieves. It also has a lot of representation of a theme that's close to me, and that if we look at the apparatus that we use nowadays to enhance our physical beings, such as cochlear implants, heart transplants, we're becoming more and more mechanical. And to peel off a local science fiction myth, maybe we're becoming the mechanical people that may invade us. But it's a fun thing to think about, however serious or unserious you take. But you'll see hints of that as well in this painting. And that was also a big influence, is the medical apparatus that was involved in a lot of the pain treatments that they tried. I really enjoy doing a lot of the shading on this and a lot of the technical work on this painting, or on this drawing, excuse me. The next painting that I want to look at is Sans Inertia, which, as an escapist, we just talked about drugs to escape our issues. This is about our American fascination with screens and the time we devote to the objectified roles on TV that don't produce anything tangible. These roles like the hero, the artist, the slut, the gay guy, the otherwise magnanimous villain, the hero. These archetypes that don't really enforce reality and often hurt a lot of people in the process of them being simulated into people's lives. You'll see that the tubing is minimal, but the person is restricted from moving at all in their observation of the screen, and it represents our addiction to these objects that produce nothing but light. There's also a little artist joke in here, in which I took the 3 additive primary colors when it comes to any kind of media art, and I used them as the base for the hollow abstract graffiti. And then I made the echo pure white, which is the mixing of those additive colors at the perfect ratio. So it's, the echo is the fill of purity, and it's kind of a artist pun. The next painting I like to look at is called Dilapidated. This painting was not so much just a painting, but a process. And it's transitional art in that it won't look this way in 6 months. What happened was I took an old canvas, shout out to my boss, Jen Trask, and it had a clay red gesso, just an Adobe looking clay red gesso. And I started to cover it with different elements just to experiment with that type of paint. And it turned into a painting that the plastic peels off the clay earth, which is a representation of what I tried to portray in a lot of this when it comes to the chemicals and the misguided nature in which we approach our environment. One of the big things I see in that argument is that we say the environment like it's some off in the area type of thing that we can take care of it, when we need to start integrating it into our philosophy as our environment, because this globe is going to continue to spin long after we're gone. But it may not be habitable for humans because of the dumb shit that we do, the chemicals we put in. You'll see a double helix representation of the chemicals that we're pushing through the earth is going to change our structure, or we're just not going to adapt and we may die. I modeled these 2 filter globes off a pair of kidneys, going back to the anatomical drawings that I did. And Then I put the theme of the earth overheating down here, which is representative of the painting itself. I think the best part about this is that the painting itself started to take on a life of its own through the experimentation of materials. And I really enjoy the message that it ended up representing conceptually. The other cool part is that, like I said, it's going to look so much different in 6 months. And there is such a great texture that I think I got with a lot of the areas in this painting. The next painting I would like, or the next drawing I would like to look at, is Circulated Anomaly. And it's another color pencil and pastel on matte board. So this is the romantic in me representing a mechanical structure, in that if we're going to have a closed system when it comes into regards with our heart, then it's going to be empty. And I mean that in the way of prejudiced and biased towards somebody that's different than us, and closing ourselves off as isolationists. It results in there being nothing to push through the machine. It's empty, it's soulless. And the pressure is just building. And if we keep ourselves isolated, it'll result in a calamitous failure of this mechanics that exists within our body. This is really inspired a lot by that Da Vinci drawing I showed you in my influences, and the piping that comes off of it, and the fact that when we view a heart, it's often open, and or the chest is open, or the anatomy is viewable. But what we don't realize is in that moment we're seeing a total display of the organ, but not of the soul that the heart represents. And my little bubbles over here are supposed to be alveoli and processing the system back through. This is inspired by a few people that I know that have had heart trouble, and me looking into the anatomy, and this drawing just kind of developed on its own with the understanding that the anomaly of isolationism causes nothing but a pressurized pipe to burst. The next drawing, or the next painting I'd like to look at, is Obstacles. And it represents a tree's ability to persist through all the man-made obstacles that we lay in front of them. A tree is made of veins. A tree is made of nerves. They can scream. They have feelings. They communicate. They react to the environment around them. And it's only that we don't know their language yet that we don't understand what they're saying. But it's also our alpha and omega situation. We cannot exist on this planet without plants. Not to filter, not to provide air, not to provide the necessary shelter we need in early times. Plants are crucial, but we subject them to all the poisons and the chemicals that exist and we produce in our environment, and yet they persist and they push through. And also, the abstract forms in the background are abstracted from certain wildlife. Have fun trying to figure that one out. I'm not giving that one away. But I really enjoyed using highlights in this picture to draw attention to certain areas and experimenting with monochromatic representation of certain fluids, gases, and objects. The next painting I'd like to talk about is Impaired Existence. And it's actually a very personal painting to me. While it started out inspired by my struggles as a child, and so when I was a kid, I had eye surgery because my eyes were wall-eyed and they had to move muscles around, and it was when I was 18 months old. It also represents my first tangible memory that I can still remember, so this is when my brain chemistry kicked on. And so when I got my eyes repaired, I would have bandages over them and my eyes would tear up and the fluid would come out as red because of the surgery, and it looked like my eyes were bleeding. And I'd get out of my bed and start wandering around and kind of freak my parents out. So while it started as something that was representative of my memory, it really turned into something that represents the struggles that my nephew, who was born with paroxysmal disorder, PVD, is going through. He was born blind and deaf without the ability to make proteins for his muscles. And so he has been going through a lot, and this kid has defied all odds, and it's been pretty tragic as of late because we thought we might lose him at one point. And all of that emotion, all of that density, all of that feeling went into this painting. The way the tubes twist, the way the predatory drones come after him, the tentacles, this is representative of the anxiety I've been feeling over the love I feel for my nephew. Shout out to Jaden. This is his painting. Love him very much. Hope to see him soon. So it's one of those direct representations of how I was talking about. It starts as one thing in your sketchbook and turns into a completely different ordeal by the end of it, and a composition that I don't know if I could recreate because of the emotion that was involved at the time. The last painting I want to show you represents my love of music. It is called Circadian Backbeat. It represents that moment when you're listening to music and something catches you and you have to turn back to your friend or reach over to the car stereo and wait, I got to rewind that, turn that up. It's that feeling that music catches you and just gets you down to your feet where you can't help but tapping them. Your hands are thumping on the steering wheel, and that a lot of the apparatus represents when I've been a PA or when I've done sound work, and a lot of these plugs and tubes are representative of some of the things I saw on set, or at least the way my brain interpreted what I saw on set. And so we've also got that great hook in the middle that just grabs you and keeps you in rhythm and draws you into the rhythm of the music that you're feeling. And that's what this represents to me, is that moment, that catch, that hook, that great feeling that makes music so durable throughout time. I also left the graffiti letters on this hollow because I felt that it needed to be filled up by music. And when we display live in fall, I really hope to be able to do that. So I'd really like to thank everybody at SNC, all the professors, Rick, Mary, Sherry, Anza, Julia, Russell, Dan, Laura, everybody. The environment at SNC is what helped me create this work. Showed me a way to think about things so that when we're creating them, you give them the space for wisdom to become something on their own. And I really can't say enough about that. I'd also like to thank my parents, Meg and Ollie, for putting up with my shit, Anza for all the technical help, Dan for all the technical help, and my boss and her husband, Jennifer and Robert, for all that they've done for me. And anybody at SNC, the students especially, it's them that help with the ideas and create that petri dish of inspiration. Thank you. And if you're interested in my art, this is my website, curiosityshopdesigns.com. Reach out, send me a message, and I'd love to talk to you about art.
Hey, James, thank you so much for sharing that with us, kind of a second time, actually, but so wonderful. So I want to volley some questions your way if you're ready for them.
Sure.
Great. Okay. So we have a question about your use of color and that the pipes are black and white. Any significance there?
Well, it was a corny artistic thing for me. They say that Da Vinci was able to do 1,000 shades between black and white to show value. And so game on. Not to mention the grays and some of the shades that I use are close, but not exactly the same. The pipes in themselves are secondary to the things going on around them, but occupy a space where they help distort perception. And that contrast between black and white is a great range to do that in.
Awesome. So another question here. How long does it take you to complete a piece like this?
It really depends on the piece. There was one or two of these that were done in 3 weeks. There's a couple that took the whole 3 months. It's really dependent on the composition itself and what it takes to bring it out. A lot of the time, I just feel like I'm nothing more than an interpreter. And a lot of this is just there to be given life to. It's the shading, once the idea is there, a lot of the steps are formal and used to bring that area to life to help it represent what the sketch was really trying to do. And that's a lot of the fine tuning to it. So sometimes that's immediate and it's apparent. And sometimes I have to step back and look at it 4 or 5 times. So yeah, I mean, there are 2 of these that took me the entire time. Started during winter break and took me the entire semester to actually do.
So maybe a very timely question, which is how has COVID-19 and kind of the state of the world influenced your work or even your studio practice?
I've had to sharpen up on my digital skills. Not to mention a lot of the paintings I did were sizable. and meant to be in the room with somebody so that they can reveal some of the texture that I've put into it and, for lack of better words, be dominating in their appearance or accepting in their appearance. But a lot of that is hard to do outside of being in person. So scale is kind of negated when we get into this kind of atmosphere, and then we kind of just adapt and roll with it. A lot of the paintings I do are wraparound paintings, and those are details you can't really show in a slideshow without being overly technical and meticulous and putting too much information that draws away from the painting. So the COVID-19 thing has really influenced the way we display it, but it also hinders us in the way that we're not around that petri dish of inspiration as much as we'd like to be, because we're at home creating in our own environments and we have to set up studio areas. And so that really has been a tough part, but it's also given new inspiration to the art in different ways as well. So I don't know if I change anything, but it has been a chance to adapt better to the digital display method and trying to be thorough in your own critique of your work, as well as reaching out to other students to critique digitally over the internet.
Digital and adapt digitally, right? You know, here we are doing a rebroadcast because on the technical end, we're still figuring stuff out too. And so I think for our last question, one that's a little bit hard because of the uncertainty of the world, but even maybe you can think about this in artistic measures rather than like maybe um, professional, but what's next for you?
I want to occupy real space. I want to make these things come off the canvas. And I want to be able to create depth within the digital world with 3D modeling. So a lot of the study I've done up there has been to introduce me into the laser cutter, 3D printers, being able to sculpt with different materials, fiberglass, silicone, wood, clay, metal, not just steel, but I work for a jeweler as well, and a job that I got through the school, but I work as a model maker and a contractor, and I work with everything animal bone to epoxy to 16th century Italian frames that we have to try and build with without shattering. So I want to be able to take these paintings and lift the surfaces so that they occupy a presence in the real world. And sometimes that may just be not doing a painting and doing a sculpture, which I think 3D graffiti sculpture that occupies real space is going to be absolutely fun and a challenge. And I think that's just the way my brain works. I'm constantly experimenting with materials. So honestly, the next thing is almost a mystery to me, but I'd like it to go in the direction where I'm making 3D objects that occupy 4D conceptuality, which is adjusting the environment within the display area so that the paintings have maximum effect. And that could be anything from music to lighting to spotlighting so that the textures show off. But yeah, building them up 3D and 4D are totally interesting to me right now. And I'm already started taking 3D rendering classes since my other classes have slowed down a little bit.
That is so exciting. I cannot wait to see what comes of that. And hopefully, we'll even get to see maybe some of that in the fall with the kind of physical hanging of your work with your fellow BFA students or peers from this semester. I think
Absolutely, that'd be
wrap
great.
this. Yeah, I think we'll wrap this up. I really want to thank you again for sharing with us a rebroadcast of this. And I want to also thank Dan for helping us kind of figure some stuff out and really looking forward to showing up again on Thursday for yet another BFA and continuing on with our gallery programming in the digital realm as we kind of learn to navigate this new space. So thank you all so much. James, is there any last things you'd like to say before we sign off?
Oh, just thank you to everybody again, and I appreciate you tuning in. I apologize if my words are a little hard to understand with the nerve damage in my face, but I hope that you guys check it out and enjoy the paintings.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that, I encourage everyone to stay safe and wash your hands.